I'm Tessa Fleming, and today on the Indo Daily, I'm joined by Irish independent security correspondent Robin Schiller. Robin, Sean McGovern, he's known as Knife. He's been in court this week for his sentencing hearing. So remind us how we got to this point, because it has been a long road.
It has, and it's been a bit of a milestone, because Sean McGovern is the first Irish criminal to be extradited from the UAE successfully back to Ireland. So he fled Dublin in April 2017 at the height of this Hutch Kinahan feud. He moved to Dubai to be with his boss, essentially Daniel Kinahan, and he stayed there for several years. Gardaí wanted to question him in relation to two specific crimes. That was a conspiracy to murder James Mago Gately, a Hutch associate, and in relation to the murder of Noel Duckegg Curwen, a grandfather who was an innocent target, an innocent murder victim as part of that feud. He stayed in Dubai. He never came home until Gardaí issued a European arrest warrant for his detention. An Interpol red notice was issued by Interpol for Dubai authorities. He was arrested there in October 2024, and after a lengthy enough process, it took about 6 months for that to finalise. He was brought back here in May of last year, and surprisingly, I suppose, he pleaded guilty, which is rare enough in these gangland offences. But when he saw in that kind of sentencing hearing this week the weight of the Garda evidence against him, it was described as a circumstantial case, but it was certainly a very strong circumstantial case, and you can see why he pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to two serious crimes, directing the activities of a criminal organisation that carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment, but it took the murder charge off the table. He was initially charged with the murder of Noel Curwen. With that guilty plea accepted by the state, that was taken off. So it was a win for him in the sense that the possibility of life imprisonment, where parole is attached as well, the mandatory life sentence, that was taken off. And that's where we found ourselves down on Monday morning in the Criminal Courts of Justice.
So this is, as I said, a sentencing hearing. We're hearing major evidence in this case, and a lot of it has to do with encrypted messages. And we've also heard details of tracking devices used by McGovern and placing Kinahan rivals under surveillance and all of that. And it seems to have been a very elaborate and a very sinister kind of modus operandi which was being played out. So maybe talk to me about what the court has been hearing about the operation itself, and in particular those encrypted messages.
So there was evidence given from two different Gardaí, Detective Superintendent David Gallagher of the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. They were looking after this conspiracy to murder James Gately in Belfast, Northern Ireland in April 2017. And then separately, Detective Sergeant Daniel Daily, who was based in Lucan at the time of Noel Curwen's murder in December 2016. And in relation to the Gately plot, there was kind of 6 strands of evidence. They relied on CCTV footage, tracking device, as I said there, analysis of sat-nav communications, and these encrypted devices. They're known as Pretty Good Privacy, Blackberries, and these were kind of the cartel's own service where they're able to email each other without being, as they thought at the time, without being intercepted by law enforcement. And these BlackBerry devices, these encrypted messages, they really give a fascinating insight into the mindset of the Kinahan cartel at the time. They're obviously a significant plank of evidence used to prosecute Sean McGovern, but some of the messages really lay out the kind of bloodthirst the Kinahans had for vengeance after the Regency Hotel. Sean McGovern himself was a victim that day. He was shot, not seriously injured, but he's still shot and wounded nonetheless. And within kind of 2 days, you have messages between Sean McGovern and an individual identified as Cap, outlining their lust for vengeance. And one of the messages that kind of stood out for me was they speak about targeting the daughter of a man known as Mink. Now, he wasn't named in court, but it's my understanding he is a senior figure within the Hutch gang. And McGovern kind of contemplates, should we do his daughter, or would it bring too much heat? And Daniel Kinahan says, yeah, probably would, but maybe Neddy Hutch. That's Eddie Hutch, the nickname for the monk's brother. And within 24 hours of that message being sent by Daniel Kinahan, Edward Hutch is shot dead in his home in the north inner city. So it shows how quickly the Kinahan gang were able to organise murders. Within 24 hours of discussing and hypothesising if they should murder Neddy, Edward Hutch was shot dead outside his home.
I know you mentioned James Mago Gately. Talk to me a little bit about him and who he was, because McGovern was believed to have been behind his attempted murder. So maybe just talk to me a little bit about all of that.
Yeah, so James Gately was and still is considered a senior figure in the Hutch organised crime group. The Kinahans certainly suspected that he was involved in the Regency Hotel murder in February 2016. He's never been even arrested over that. He's never been prosecuted, but that's certainly the belief of the Kinahan organisation, that he had an involvement in that. And that culminated over the space of 19 months. There are continuous messages trying to target Mago, trying to get information on him, his whereabouts. Tracking devices are brought in from the UK. They're put on his car. They're put on his sister's car, his partner's car. And that culminates in on April 3rd, 2017, where you have this Estonian hitman Imre Rakis arriving in Dublin. The belief is that he was brought in by the Kinahans to target James Gately. He's arrested in West Dublin safe house, and the plot is essentially foiled. Tracking devices found under Gately's car, and we have the investigation beginning. And since then, there's been multiple people convicted as part of that conspiracy.
How was that plan to have James Gately killed? How did that go wrong for them?
So, we're obviously, the evidence were kind of starting from a few years back and leading up to it, but how it was figured out at the time, or they came across it, was Gardaí received intelligence that Imre Rakis was travelling to Dublin. Rakis would have been, flagged by international law enforcement. He's this high-profile criminal and had a reputation as a hitman for hire. He arrives at Dublin Airport. He's tracked by a surveillance Gardaí into Dublin city centre. He kind of walks around the north inner city, where a number of Hutch family members would have lived, who were targets of the Kinahan gang. He would have been picked up and brought to a safe house, effectively, in Blanchardstown. Gardaí kind of had enough information at that stage that, look, he's here for some untoward business. They obtained a court warrant, and the following morning, Gardaí from the GND-OCB and the Emergency Response Unit, they entered that house. They breached it, they recovered a firearm, they arrested Rakis and a number of associates, and one of the Gardaí picked up this BlackBerry device that Rakis had himself, and he kind of felt there was something untoward about it, that it might start wiping immediately, so he started taking pictures of it. As he was doing that, he took several, but as he was doing that, in front of him, it started remotely wiping, so the gang obviously got wind of what happened and were trying to destroy the evidence. Thankfully, through the quick thinking Garda, he managed to get some of that evidence, retain it, and it showed the communications between Imre Rakis, between Sean McGovern on his knife, and this bond handle, and how there were advanced efforts being made to murder James Gately. Rakis was clearly meant to be the hitman in that plot.
After that plan, that botched plan of the attempted murder of James Gately, there was messages being traded on this encrypted messaging platform. Talk to me a little bit about that and what we can glean from them.
Yeah, so it shows that the gang were really kind of reeling from Imre Rakis being arrested, and there's text between Sean McGovern, knife, this bond handle, and another associate, Leg, who was Pater Keaton, and they're trying to figure out what has actually happened. If the guards know the full extent of what their plan was, they're making plans to remove themselves from any evidence. There was a van specifically used for carrying out surveillance on James Gately, and one associate says, look, we just have to get rid of that and ditch it. They're discussing amongst themselves, Sean McGovern and Pater Keaton, about how the Gardaí could have known about the plot, and they're kind of reassuring themselves, well, there's no rats in my camp and there's no rats in the other person's camp, so it must come from elsewhere. And then you have kind of develops a day later into what do we do next. You have Sean McGovern saying certain things about James Gately, and this bond handle saying, look, we have to change tactics. We're going to have to, like a football manager, on to the next game, we're after losing that one, so we'll have to change it up. And then he reassures Sean McGovern, saying, look, we have a plan for Mago and we're going to get him in 2 to 4 weeks. And it wasn't part of this case, but what happened a month later was that Quaylon Smith, a gunman from North Dublin, shot James Gately several times outside a filling station on the Clonshock Road. So it shows how quickly they were able to readjust after this operation, get a new hit team in place, and then try to get James Gately again.
I suppose when you're talking there about encrypted messages and tracking devices and surveillance and a hitman coming over to take out Gately, I mean, it's such a sophisticated operation, and I suppose it really shows how deeply that kind of sense of bloodlust and that revengefulness really goes in the Kinahan gang, and how deep it really goes down. I suppose, from your point of view, how deeply did that mindset run through the organisation as a whole, and what does it really tell us, I suppose, about the internal culture of the Kinahan cartel?
It's telling that they were just out for blood, out for pure murder. Within 2 days you have Sean McGovern using the alias Knife, texting Cap saying, we're not stopping till anyone's dead, they're all gone, on my baby's life, we're going to kill them all. And you could say, right, 2 days after being shot, their friend being shot dead, that's understandable, but that carries right through for several months. And in relation to the plot and the successful murder, unfortunately, of Noel Kerwin in September of that year, kind of manifests himself, and they're discussing targets, they're discussing hitmen to go after Noel Kerwin, and there's texts basically setting out how we'll put a certain individual called Teeth on it. Now, he's inferred to be a hitman for the gang, and they want to get his confidence back up. So the inference there is that Teeth has been involved in unsuccessful plots in the past, and they see Noel Curran really as a soft target. And we've had 18 people shot dead as part of the feud. 2 were described as innocent bystanders. Noel Curran doesn't fit into that category because he wasn't a bystander, so he was discriminately targeted by the Kinahans because they thought that he had some connection to Gerard Hutch, and unfortunately that manifested in December 2016, Noel Curran being murdered.
Robin, at the height of the Kinahan-Hutch feud, the scale of the violence was really staggering. There was so much bloodshed, there was so much violence. As you say, innocent people were getting caught up in the attacks, and there were just so many lives being lost. Inside the Kinahan organisation, was there ever real questioning of how reckless and destructive the gang's approach to violence had become?
Not from what we've seen in court, anyway, from those messages. They do give an insight into the mindset of the Kinahans throughout that kind of 2-year period. The only bit of doubt was when Sean McGovern asked, should we do Mink's daughter? And Daniel Kinahan responds, yeah, probably would bring too much heat on us. Other than that, they're kind of all in agreement that certain people have to go, certain people have to be targeted, and with real vengefulness, just kind of bloodlust. Targeting these people indiscriminately. Some people who were killed in that feud were suspected of having some sort of involvement, logistical involvement in the Regency. A lot weren't, a lot were innocent bystanders. Noel Curran was targeted because he was photographed beside the monk at his brother's funeral. And, Daniel Daily gave evidence this week that that was the motive essentially for it. He'd nothing to do with the monk. He was just happened to be standing beside him at the funeral when he was pictured, and the Kinahans decided, right, that was enough to murder him.
Just when you're talking about Noel Curran, or Noel Duckegg Curran, his name has been popping up in court, and as you say, this is a man who has had no involvement in criminality. And you talk about kind of gangland violence. You hear the word and the term senseless a lot when it comes to the gangland killings, but in this particular case, it seems to be an extreme example. And we've heard from Noel Curran's daughter Donna in court as well. She gave quite a fiery and emotional victim impact statement. What did she have to say?
Yeah, well, I've heard a lot of victim impact statements over the years covering courts, and that was certainly one of the most powerful. She outlined, it was read out by the prosecuting barrister, she outlined the impact it had on the family. She described how, December 22nd, it started as any other normal day and turned into their worst nightmare. She recalled how she heard about the murder. She was in work that day. She was working in the social services, and she got a call from her dad's phone, and it was his partner's daughter who rang her saying that, you have to make your way back here quickly to Clondalkin. Noel's been shot, and she was in hysterics, understandably. She recalled how her work colleague came into her, asked her what was wrong. She told him, and they immediately got into his car, and he drove her to the house in St. Ronan's Drive. Now, it was Christmas time. It was a really busy period. And she told how it seemed like the longest drive of all time because the traffic was just absolutely insane. When she got towards Liffey Valley near the house, she saw the lights and sirens, the traffic still backed up, and she got out of the car and sprinted towards her dad's home. She got there, it was just pandemonium with guards everywhere. She was trying to tell my dad I'm here. She was kind of shepherded then into a neighbour's house while her father was lying fatally injured on the floor, and she was told not to look to her left hand side because he was lying there, and they were trying to shield her from it. The statement moved on towards the end. It was really personalised. Again, Sean McGovern, he was in court himself, and she spoke about, Sean, you were shot in the Regency Hotel yourself. You should know what it feels like for families to feel that pain and that trauma. What happened? Why would you inflict that on their own family? She spoke about, really kind of directly at him, saying that, you've no intelligence between the lot of yous. You were caught in DNA, you were caught in tracking devices that were brought into your own house. All this evidence against you. And she made the point that my father would actually be offended that somebody as stupid as you killed him. And then in real kind of direct in evidence against Sean McGovern, she made reference to the fact that while he was on the run in Dubai, on the run from the murder charge against her father, his own father died in Crumlin, and he wasn't able to make his way home for that because he was on the run and at large. And she said, I hope you feel some guilt about that. So really powerful stuff. And McGovern, he brought a few Sudoku books in. He was trying to play it off as he didn't hear what was being said in the evidence, but he kept his head down. But you could see that last kind of line about his own father, he did kind of clench his jaw, and he certainly listened to what was being said, even though he's trying to play it off as if he wasn't. I've
heard a stream of striking evidence in recent days that I suppose offers a rare glimpse into the mindset driving the Kinahan cartel. And with these newly released encrypted messages now in the mix, do you think that they'll become a crucial piece of the puzzle in linking other Kinahan associates with different murders and separate killings, and I suppose potentially widening the net of this entire investigation into the Kinahans?
I think it definitely will. We've seen kind of evidence in the hierarchy of the Kinahans being involved in these conversations. It follows that the underlings, the subordinates, the people who were carrying out these murders, who were facilitating them, are also on those messages. We did the piece during the week about how the murder of Daniel Kinahan, his inquest a number of months ago, heard how, Gardaí are still investigating that murder. It was December 2015. It's still ongoing, and there was new avenues of investigation which weren't previously available to investigators. That relates to these encrypted messages, which we understand were seized as part of that investigation. So there may be further movement in that case to identify the hitman and bring that case to justice. In relation to Eddie Hutch, we spoke about earlier on, the Monk's brother, he was shot dead 3 days after Regency Hotel. A number of people were arrested initially as part of that investigation. One of them was rearrested, effectively a chief suspect in the murder. And that rearrest, you can only rearrest someone if you have new information that comes to light in relation to the same offence. My understanding is that part of that new evidence, at least, was these encrypted messages. That's only 2 cases we know about where prosecutions are being advanced and investigations are being advanced, and I'd be very surprised if there aren't further prosecutions brought against the actual hitmen on foot of these encrypted messages.
And then I suppose you have Daniel Kinahan over in the UAE. He's awaiting extradition. So I wonder if the fall of Sean McGovern will have an impact on the case of Daniel Kinahan. What's your own thoughts on that?
I think inadvertently, whether he knows it or not, he has helped the state's case in some way against Kinahan. Our understanding is that a lot of weight against Daniel Kinahan, the evidence against him, is fixed on those encrypted messages. He's obviously never hands-on in these crimes. He's, directing, but he's never actually at the scene. Sean McGovern was involved in a really on-the-ground role in surveillance, in, tracking, using a laptop to track Noel Kerwin when he was shot dead. For Daniel Kinahan, the evidence isn't there. It's more so in the encrypted messages. We have evidence of Sean McGovern on the phone using this word knife, and by his guilty plea, he's accepted that he is knife. He's accepted that evidence against him on those encrypted messages, that's him. That will feature, I'd imagine, in the prosecution against Daniel Kinahan when he comes back here. So that certainly does help the state's case in saying that, look, one of your close lieutenants who we say you were in contact with, he's accepted that this is him. He's accepted the evidence against him. So whether he knows it or not, he has inadvertently helped the state's case against Daniel Kinahan.
The investigation into the Kinahan gang has stretched on for years. And I suppose it was a real coup for the Gardaí when they were able to determine that in those encrypted messages that knife was Sean McGovern and all the information that revealed. But I suppose when you look at just how long it took to kind of get this investigation to where it is now, I mean, is that down to witnesses maybe too afraid to come forward, witnesses being intimidated, or does it really all stem from, I suppose, the Gardaí maybe being hampered by, I suppose, their investigative capabilities?
It stems from a few different things. Like in relation to specifically Daniel Kinahan and Sean McGovern, you rarely see, or in the past have seen, maybe more than 10 years ago, in relation to a serious organised crime offence, including murder, you may have the hitman convicted, you may have a getaway driver convicted, but the actual people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, the convictions were never there because they weren't using these encrypted messages. It takes time for that investigation, for a good investigation to be progressed, and for an investigation that will result in a prosecution that is solid, that can stand up in court. That takes time. It would be great to see somebody, arrested, charged within 24 hours of something happening. That's just not realistic. If you want, solid, safe prosecutions, it takes time for those investigations. You have the other aspect of the fact that Sean McGovern was at large for, 8-9 years. Daniel Kinahan last set foot in Ireland in April 2016, I think it is. He has to be back here in 10 years, so it's hard to advance the case directly against him. In relation to Garda tools, they needed assistance from international law enforcement, colleagues in North America, Dutch police as well, had to be used to encrypt or decrypt those messages. It would be great if they had those tools, but it's not something that's available to every law enforcement. It's a very specific police force who have that, so it would be great if we had them, but Garda don't. But, I think the Guards do have to be commended for the sticking with this case, the amount of evidence that's been built up both against Sean McGovern. It was clear in the sentencing hearing that you can see why he pleaded guilty. He was absolutely nailed on the circumstantial case, albeit a very strong case against him. And same with Daniel Kinahan. The Guards will say, and the state will say, when he comes back and he is put on trial, that they have an immensely strong case against him to prove the offence of direct organised crime gang.
This sentencing hearing is still ongoing. How long do you think that Sean McGovern could potentially go to jail for, and will the fact that he pled guilty have an impact on that?
It's always fun to guess a sentence from judges because they vary so much. The fact that he pleaded guilty will have a massive impact. You're normally given about 25% credit for an early guilty plea. So the three judges of the Special Criminal Court, they'll start off with a headline sentence, and then they'll work down from that in terms of mitigation. His guilty plea will be the most significant. On Friday we're going to hear mitigation on behalf of his senior counsel, Michael Bowman. What that will be, it's hard to say. How can he mitigate, Sean McGovern and what he's done? There might be, reports from Portlaoise Prison to say he's been a model prisoner. Might go a little bit towards it. But in terms of sentencing, it was brought up by his own barrister on Monday. An associate, Patrick Keaton, was convicted after pleading guilty to a similar charge in relation to the James Gately plot. He pleaded guilty to directing a criminal organisation. He was jailed for 12 years and once suspended. And Michael Bowman made the point that his client, Sean McGovern, had a similar role in that plot. They both directed surveillance, they're both involved. So in relation to one offence here, you'd imagine it would be fairly similar, 11 years. Then you have the actual murder of Noel Curran. Now, the murder charge was effectively withdrawn by the state, but he directed a criminal gang in carrying out that murder. That carries a life sentence. Now, it won't be that, but, if you're looking at 11 years for a failed conspiracy, you'd imagine that it has to go up a good bit for an actual successful murder. And then the other aspect taken into account is, will there be consecutive sentences? And, Sean McGovern is such a high-profile criminal involved in real horrendous violence on the streets of not just Dublin, but wider around Ireland, Meath as well. A person was shot dead in Spain. It's very, very likely that he could be facing a consecutive sentence, and he could be facing around 20 years in jail, if not more.
So the fact that you and I have Sean McGovern and Daniel Kinahan, two very high profile figures in the Kinahan cartel, the Gardaí have now caught up with them. They're facing justice at the minute. What does that tell us, do you think, about the future endeavours of the Kinahan cartel? What impact will this have on the gang?
It'll have to have some kind of impact. Daniel Kinahan was the day-to-day director of operations. He effectively took control of that gang from his father several years ago, and it's a crime group that's worth around 1.5 billion by some estimates. That being said, it's just too big of a machine to fall by two significant prosecutions, albeit they are major ones. Contingency plans were being put in place. You have other people still in Dubai who are high-profile, high-level criminals. There are still high-level people at the very apex of that organisation who can take over the reins. There might be some, impact in their operations for a period of time, but it's just too big a machine to fail. And unfortunately, that entire organisation won't come down until that entire leadership structure is taken down by, and not just Gardaí, international help is needing that as well. You have the Americans involved, Dubai police, Dutch police as well, the UK's National Crime Agency. So it really is a kind of collective effort that's needed to bring down the entire organisation by bringing down that leadership.
Robin Schiller, thank you very much.
Thank you.